agenda on the
And Councilor Downs, I just want to also kind of acknowledge that I'll be here for a while, and then I've got an item coming up in programs and services, so I'll be back and forth for a little bit.
All right. We'll try to deal with your split personality and attention. All right. So this is the regularly scheduled meeting of the Public Safety and Transportation Committee on January 18th. Thank you everyone for coming and welcome. At the start of the meeting, I have council members from Ward 1, council members and committee members from Ward 1, John Oliver, from Ward 2, Tariq Lucas, from Ward 3, on the phone from her car, that's dedication, Councillor Maliki, from Ward 4, Vice Chair Chris Markowitz, from Ward 5, that's me, Andrea Downs, the chair from Ward 6, Councillor Bowman, from Ward 7, I do not yet have Councillor Grossman, but from Ward 8, I have Councillor Lipoff, welcome like Rick. So also here at the start of the meeting is Police Chief John Carmichael, Director of Planning Barney Heath, Economic Development Planner John Sisson, and who else do I have from
Mr. Kosis and Mr. Sobel.
Correct. Transportation Planner David Kosis and DPW Transportation Director Jason Sobel. And we also have some dedicated members of the public. Particularly want to call out Mike Halley, who is chair of TAG, and Jeremy Freudberg, who is an alternate member of the Traffic Council. We are starting with the Traffic Council. Number 8-23, annual report of the work of the Traffic Council for 2022. This is David Kosis, Traffic Council Chair, providing the annual report of the work of the Traffic Council for 2022. And just for the public's information, that report is attached to the agenda, which is online. I probably used the agenda to get the link to find the meeting. And Mr. Kosis, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Yes, good evening, everybody. This item's usually pretty quick because it's a similar report that I've given over the past few years. Should I share my screen so we could just take a look at Appendix A? Let me try and share. Okay, good. Now I have to find Appendix A in here. Okay, can everyone see that? Good?
Yep.
I'll assume it's good. Okay. So in 2022, Traffic Council held 11 meetings. One of them was hybrid and the rest of them were on Zoom. And we handled 90 items over the year. 7 of these 90 items we're still holding on our agenda. The ones that we're holding are the street sweeping trial in Nonantum, which probably we'll put on the agenda either in February or in March. It's been pretty successful. We're also holding changes to the parking regulations on Albemarle Road and on Watertown Street, holding the item that closes that one block of Albemarle Road between Craft Street and North Street. We're holding the item that is in Newton Highlands, where we issued parking permits to the senior center staff temporarily while they're located in the Highlands. And then we also are holding one item that relates to parking changes on Grove Street down by Washington Street in Lower Falls. So we only denied 2 items in 2022. One of them was a request for a stop sign on Pearl Street. And then we also denied the one item that was a request for resident parking permits on Langley Road, down by Route 9. We only had one appeal all year. That was a request to put in a stop sign at Exeter and Berkeley Street on West Newton Hill. So for that item, Traffic Council voted to approve the stop sign. It was appealed. It came to this committee and to City Council, where the Traffic Council vote was upheld, and that stop sign is installed now. Some of the bigger issues, the bigger items that took multiple meetings, I can think of two that took several meetings. One of them was at the end of the year. It was a lot of changes to the parking regulations in West Newton Square, which I think we'll see starting to roll out in the next little while, adding new meters, changing the time limits of several meters in West Newton. Another item that took several meetings was that we changed all the parking regulations on Adams Street in Nonantum. That took about 3 meetings, or maybe 4. But now everything is signed, and I think we haven't heard any complaints. So what else? So back in July, City Council gave staff the administrative authority so that we can now make corrections to our traffic and parking regulations without having to docket every single item. If they reflect long-standing conditions in the field, we can now just make those changes as long as we're not adding any signs in the field or removing anything from the field. It's, we can now quickly just fix different errors or omissions from our traffic and parking regulations. So just since July, we made 49 of these administrative changes. So now, it doesn't need to go through the whole Traffic Council process anymore. So that was a really good change for us, I think. And that pretty much sums up quickly the year in review, and I can take any questions. Maybe I'll stop sharing. And we can move to any questions anyone might have.
Anyone with any questions or comments on the Traffic Council annual report? Yes, Councilor Bowman.
Thank you. I just want to thank Mr. Kosis and the whole Traffic Council for the great work that you do. I know it's not always easy to talk to residents about parking and their different feelings about the way the streets should run and stop signs and such. You do a really good job at trying to take everybody's opinions and make them all work. So I know that's not always easy, so I do appreciate that.
Thank you very much, Councilor Bowman.
Anyone else? Well, Mr. Kosis, I have to say it's wonderful to have the ability to administratively correct items that are different in the TPR than in the field. Just for your information, for the council and the public's information, I used to take half a meeting every meeting, and was a very long process of basically correcting Scrivener's errors or deciding whether something that was in the TPR should be in the field, which sometimes got complicated, but it's definitely expedited things and made for better use of our time in Traffic Council. And I appreciate how calmly and carefully you lead the committee. Because when it comes to parking in your neighborhood, people can get a little worried. And if there's no other comments from the committee, I will take.
Can I just ask one quick question, just to make sure that the report that I produced is useful enough that you would want the exact same type of report this time next year?
How do you feel as a committee about the administrative changes? Do you want them in the same format? Do you want this level of detail?
I actually think that I think that's very helpful. I don't know how much additional work that you
That-
did to
that would
do
be-
this.
Yeah, that would be my question. How much work is it for you, Mr. Kozis?
Well, I mean, what I do is, our traffic council meetings are on Thursday, so the first thing I do the next day on Friday is I just add in what happened, over the course of the year. So it really isn't, it's sort of easy for me at this point because we've done it so many times. It doesn't take that much time. I just want to
Yeah.
make sure it's useful for everyone.
Yeah, I would think that it's useful, that, over time, it could be useful when we, 5 years from now, if somebody wants to change, we can go back and say, you know what, we actually changed and not have to try to figure out what we did or why we made certain decisions, to be able to pinpoint like when it was made. I think that that's helpful. Or to understand what similar decisions have been made, in the area.
And I would agree. I think that as long as we're talking about a rather, I guess the term would be low effort or simple to complete process, I think the information is super helpful. It's good to know.
Okay, thank you all.
And I think from my perspective, it's really helpful to be able to look and just go to the ward, find the stuff that's changed, figure out what that means and what it might look like, and then just say, oh, okay, good, that's done, or whatever. It really is quite useful.
Can I add something?
Sure.
Mr. Kosis, is the Appendix B, do you keep that in Microsoft Excel?
Yes, it's in Microsoft Excel.
Okay. If anyone on the council wants, because it's easier, I work in Excel all day on the day job. Would it be possible for you to share if someone wants it in Excel, to send you an email and you could share it in Excel?
Yeah, I'm more than happy to do that.
Okay.
Just send me an email, anybody who might
Yeah.
want that.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Ms. Delaney, we take a no action necessary vote on this?
Yes, you do.
All right, I need a motion.
So moved.
Thank you, Vice Chair. So we have a motion. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any nays? Any abstentions? We'll call that unanimous. Thank you very much, Mr. Kosis, and we'll see you tomorrow night. All right, our next item is 6722, which is kind of an omnibus regular discussion with the police department on police data, including crashes, types of calls, numbers, and dispositions. We last heard from Chief Carmichael on December 7th and talked mostly about mental health, domestic violence, and substance abuse issues and the crisis intervention team. And I promised that we would talk about crashes in more detail at this meeting, because these things need, I think, more in-depth information and analysis than, rather than overview and survey, although those are useful as well. So Chief, you sent over some more detailed information, which I hope everyone on the committee had time to open up and at least look at.
Would you like me to share my screen?
Would you like that, Chief?
Hi, good evening, everybody. Yes, that would be great. If we could share it. and,
Okay, what would you
put it
like
up
to
there,
see
that would be well.
first? The
Well,
crash
we
data?
have the Newton Police Department. Yeah, that's what we have for the presentation tonight is as Council Downs mentioned, we talked about a lot of the other issues that we were dealing with in 2022. Tonight, we're primarily focusing on our 2022 crash data with also
Oh.
some comparisons to some of the other years. And
So is this what you want to see? Which Chief Carmichael, the one I just showed you?
I didn't see it actually.
Oh, wait,
but,
sorry.
the Newton
You're
Police-
not sharing your screen.
You're not sharing yet, no.
Oh, sorry.
Oh,
Share. That.
there we go. Outstanding. All right, thank you. All right, first, I just want to say this. I thank everybody for their patience. As you know, we've been experiencing some issues with our IT. We lost our IT manager during this in 2022. I'm happy to report that we were able to hire an outstanding IT manager, Matt Taccio. Matt has joined us as of last month and has already done a tremendous job kind of assessing some of the needs of the department and where we've been and where we need to go in the future as far as our all of our data and really making a lot of it as publicly accessible as possible, public facing. We're going to be revamping the website. We're going to be looking at some interactive crime mapping that will be interactive, that people will be able to go onto the website and find any information that they might want. We did institute LexisNexis last year, but that, again, even though that's helpful to us internally, it's not very helpful to the general public, as that's not a front-facing type of software. So I want to thank Matt Taccio. He's our new IT manager, and also Officer Mike Bozio, who is our crime analyst, and Officer Drew Vello and Brian Wallace, who have really helped us kind of maintain where we are right now until we can get up and running a little bit better. So I appreciate everybody's patience. I know it's been a little bit of time since we've been able to get really good data out there. But in looking at this, this is our crash data from going back to 2017 to 2022. We can always kind of rule out 20, 21, 22, that COVID timeframe. That always seems to throw our statistics off. But in comparison to 2022 and going back to 2017, 2018, overall crashes were down comparatively to back then. However, as you can see there are some other concerns that we're looking at and we need to look closer at, particularly our pedestrian crashes, our bicyclist crashes, where, as you can see, in 2022 for pedestrians, we had 39, and going back, that's the highest we've had since 2017 when we had 40. And similarly, with bicyclist crashes in 2017, we had 26, and this past year we had 27, which is actually the most we've had in that 5-year time frame. One of the interesting things, one thing that this doesn't show, and we need to we're going to be looking at it as more of an awareness and education piece, is that what this doesn't show always is the cause of the crash, right? So even with pedestrians or bicyclists, we want to do is try and break down the data even a little bit more to see, what was it, a bicyclist that got struck because the motor vehicle struck them, or was it a situation where perhaps a bicyclist wasn't following the rules of the road as they should, and may have, or cutting across traffic or doing something that may have contributed to that crash. So we want to try and look at that and dissect that a little bit more. All right. Go down to the comparisons further down.
This.
This is
Yes.
these total crashes. So these are total crashes from 2021 to 2022. And as you can see, we had 137 more in 2022 than 2021, a 13% increase. And we'll get into that data a little bit more as we go through. This chart here breaks it down by month. And so as you can see, probably some of the higher months are more, believe it or not, in the summertime. So June timeframe, May timeframe, and the spring is where you might think it would be the winter time. Pedestrian crashes, as I just mentioned, comparatively to 2021, we had 32 in 2021, 39 in 2022. That's an increase, 22%. Bicycle crashes also an increase, it up by 1 with a 4% increase. Then we broke down the location, and as I mentioned, I think in some of the other meetings, Massachusetts even tracks the high crash intersections across Massachusetts. Newton doesn't seem to make that list for whatever reason, but on our own data, as you can see, Center Street and Wash, that is the highest crash location in the city, 19 crashes at that location. Coming in second is 22114 Washington Street, that's Newton Wellesley Hospital. That there is a little bit off because that also includes the crashes that happen in the parking garage and in the parking lot of Newton Wellesley Hospital. So it's a little higher than probably what you would think out on Washington Street. But those crashes are built into that. And then you can see these are our top 20 locations. And you can see the data all the way from the 19 at Center and Wash all the way down to 5 crashes that we had at Center and Central Ave.
So if I can interrupt here for a minute, I took the opportunity of opening up Google Maps and sort of plotting out these various things. And Center Street and Washington Street is on what we fondly call the circle of death that goes around the exit at exit 17,
Right.
Or former exit 17. But if you look at there are at least 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 other addresses on those top 20 crash locations that also qualify as the circle of death. They're within a block of that circle or in that circle or on that circle. And we've known this for a long time. I added them up. If you take those, you have 54 crashes just there. Unfortunately, they don't tend to be more than dings and dents. They really aren't. It isn't really a death circle. It's a circle of dings and dents, but that gets a lot of your, that's clearly our top crash location. And then a couple of others that can be clustered, if I may. Beacon and Walnut Street and 916 Walnut Street are both 4 corners for 13. So that comes in as number 3 after Newton Wellesley Hospital. And then there's a cluster at Walnut, Walnut and Watertown, Albemarle, Craft Street, and Crafts and North Street that I think are all probably enough of a neighborhood that we could call that out as an area where we have some issues as well. This is why it's so important to try to map them out, is to get a sense of where we have issues that might be part of the next conversation I want to have around the crash data, which is what are we using this in our traffic calming evaluation as a way to prioritize where we're focusing our efforts in the most cost-effective manner. So sorry, I'll let you go.
No, thank you. That was appreciate that. And so in some of our responses, we obviously we do try it and recognize these areas. We do try to put extra directed patrols, directed enforcement, targeted enforcement, that type of thing. We have grants that are coming up where we have the pedestrian grant where we look at certain locations. That is not to be it's not a fix, but it's just something that we do pay attention to these areas. Our traffic bureau pays attention to it as far as making sure we're doing more patrols in those areas. Okay, next is so crashes by time of day. and looking at this won't be really surprising, but most of the injury accidents that we have are occurring around either 8 o'clock in the morning or later on, around 3 in the afternoon. Also on property damage types of crashes, 7 a.m. is kind of a high area, and 4 to 5 in the area of 4 to 5 time range at night. Crashes by the day of the week, as far as injury crashes, Wednesday takes the highest amount of the injury crashes, and property damage pretty even, but Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday timeframe is the highest for property damage. One of the things that we did not add in here is we have a significant amount of hit and run crashes as well, and that I think has been increasing across the state, and mostly for property damage type crashes. I know there is a bill that's likely to be filed. I think tomorrow, actually Friday is the deadline for the bill filings, but I hope that they will tighten up the failure to stop at a motor vehicle crash or leaving the scene. Right now, it's just basically a minor misdemeanor, but it really has been something that we've seen increase. I would say probably 20% of our crashes are actually a hit and run, where the one of the operators doesn't stop and let themselves be known.
Chief, I noticed that the total number of crashes here is a little bit different from the total number of crashes in your cover sheet, which I think was 1203 for 2022. Are these 2022 crashes?
Those are, and part of what, so that we don't have our data, we don't have the ability to just pull this data out. So
Okay.
we had to basically do a lot of this by hand. And that's why, like, when I opened, I was talking about us having different types of software so that we can extract some of the important data that we need, but also that you're all asking us for. Right now, we do have some inability to do some of those things just based on our computer system.
Okay.
And that was, if I may, Madam Chair, I was just about to ask a very similar question that might be appropriate here, and that was, are some of these data points kind of cross-referenceable? For example, if we were to ask about contributing factors, or the title of the other chart was vehicle actions, excuse me, by crash location, is that something that is kind of outside our reach as well right now?
Currently it is, because we don't have the software. Yeah, we don't have the software right now. We're looking at different systems to help us, and a lot of our technologies is behind, and we're going to have to work really hard, and I'll likely be coming before City Council for a lot of different things to help with our information technology system overall, but also for just being able to provide the data and show the public exactly what they want to see.
All right,
Excellent.
thank you.
So we do have
This-
some ability to massage this. I believe Mr. Halley, is the chair of the Transportation Advisory Group, has worked on specific crash locations and looked at the reports to get a sense of what are the most frequent operations that are and times of day and things like that are causing crashes, so that in trying to devise an engineering solution, we have a sense of which actions are the problem. Am I correct with that, Mr. Halley?
That's right. My background is in sort of data science and using the information. It was previously available with the police up till sort of mid 2022. We've been able to sort of mine the reports and extract some of the information that we have using sort of open data technologies that are open source and available to use. And similarly, we can use the state database that goes back to, I think, 2002 and cross-reference off of that, because sometimes the state extracts more information so that we can do more sort of more analysis and answer the kind of questions. One thing I would say that's really very helpful, like I know Jen Martin from Safe Routes to Schools is on the call, that being able to look at the pictures in the crash reports that the officers put a lot of time into gives you this really great sense of, at a glance, what happened. I mean, you do have to read the report, and sometimes there's very sensitive information in the report. I think it's possible, if we made this more available, that instead of a name, it is motor vehicle operator 1 and stuff like that. But even without that, the pictures are so helpful in exactly what the chief said, which is, you see in the sense like, yeah, I see probably who was at fault here. We have to look at the actual documentation. And so anything that the police could provide the public at a data point of view, we understand that whether it's computer systems or staff or expertise is always going to be, in today's climate, it's going to be very difficult to get everything possible. But I think there are people in the community that are really interested. And just the last piece is, the more, I think we have lots of information that lots of topics that involve dealing with the public. And, I think the chief has mentioned, if someone is guessing what, someone's speeding on their street, the guess of how fast they think that car is going is often not accurate. It's too fast. The great thing about the crash reports is they bring real facts and real history to discussions, and that the more that we can provide the public that, the more we can have discussions around what's really happening and come up with sort of community solutions to it. So I appreciate both council and the police and other departments such as GIS and mapping all working together to really produce something that both departments and the public can use. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
thank you very much. Yeah,
right.
and even with the LexisNexis stuff that we have, it was good. It gathered our attention because it was free, but it's not as useful as we would have hoped because it's not public facing. It's just kind of stuff that we can extract. So it's not as helpful as we would like it.
Sure. I would just add,
Crash.
that if we can, get together with people who are interested in the department now that you've got maybe more stable staff, I'd be happy to show what we have and see, even if it's just for your own use, what can we make available to you? What technologies are there? They have the advantage of being sort of free and open, so you don't get tied up with a vendor, and it'll really complement the LexisNexis stuff.
That would be great. Thank you. Okay, so we're at crashes by age. The 25 to 29 age cohort is significantly higher than some of the others. As you can see there, this is the type of stuff that Lexis can pull out for us that we don't typically have. Like our own internal wouldn't do that, but it pulls this data out for us. Okay. Where are we? 10. Contributing factors. So with motor vehicle crashes, I mean, the contributing factors, the biggest things are this, that distracted driving, aggressive driving, impaired driving, those are many times contributing factors to the vast majority of crashes we have. But there are other, as you can see, like no improper driving, that most of our crashes are minor fender benders. Under Mass General Law, we have to report any crash that's over $1,000 in damage. As you can imagine, a cracked headlight and front quarter panel will be $1,000. So mostly we have to report on almost every crash just because of that property damage threshold. But this just kind of breaks down the different contributing factors. Aside from no improper driving, inattention is the biggest one, which is essentially distracted driving. People, the motorist or a pedestrian, bicyclist, whatever it might be, is distracted in some manner, which contributes to that crash.
Can I ask a question on that?
Certainly, go ahead.
As you know, Chief Carmichael, I think it was a couple years ago, the state made it illegal to drive a car while talking on your cell phone. Do you have any data on this for 2022 in Newton on how many warnings or citations, tickets you did for motorists using a cell phone while driving a car?
Sure. Well, that's a great question, first of all. So you're right. Prior to the hands-free law that went into effect, the way that it used to be was that you could write a citation for somebody that was texting on their phone, essentially, or looking something up, but it didn't include like dialing the phone or things like that. It wasn't a hands-free type of law. So essentially the law that was originally created was unenforceable. When you stop somebody for a civil motor vehicle infraction and they had their phone in their hand and they, you could say that they were texting, but they say I was dialing my phone, it made it impossible to enforce that law. You can't just ask somebody to give them your phone and verify that. So that law was in effect for years. It was never used. When the second hands-free law went into effect, which was hands-free, that you could not hold the device, you can't dial, you can't talk on the phone using hands and that type of thing. When that went into effect, that actually gave us more ability to enforce that particular law. That law also includes reporting requirements that were built into it to make it mandatory that all police departments are required to report all warnings, citations, and arrests, and the demographics of every one of those stops. And we've actually we've provided that data in some of the previous meetings that we've had. Again, in order for us to find that, we would have to have a way to do it. We'd have to go through them by hand because it doesn't actually break down the actual what the citation was written for or what the warning was written for. So that we could do it. It would just take a significant amount of administrative work to do it. Did that answer the question?
Are you good?
Yes, it did answer the question. Yes, it did. Yeah, I'm good. Thank you.
Councilor Bowman, you have a hand up.
I do. So thank you. So are these top 10 contributing factors gathered from whether a driver is cited or not, an operator is cited, or it's another code? Because I'm surprised that there's so many. Yep.
Yeah, these are from the crash reports themselves, not from the citations issued.
Okay. I'm just surprised there's so many that are no improper driving, because I guess I feel,
and that's really because a lot of these, there's a crash in the parking lot at Newton Wellesley Hospital. They're not being cited. There was no, they didn't blow through a red light. They weren't speeding. It wasn't something like that. And that's where some of those come into play.
Okay, thank you.
And a lot of times there's a misconception that the police, like if there's a fatal crash or near fatal crash that we're doing reconstruction on, and the reconstructionist is working on that crash to determine fault, that's not typically how every more minor motor vehicle crash is handled. The officers are documenting the crash. They're putting the facts and the circumstances of the crashes, submitting it to the state, but they're documenting contributing factors, but they're not essentially determining fault. The insurance companies more determine fault the officers are documenting the crash and submitting them. And you know, these are factors that many times are coming into play.
Right, and it's not necessarily fault, it's just, you're not in the accident reconstruction business for these minor things. Am I right? It's just that.
That's right, yeah.
They,
The officers are documenting the facts and the circumstances of the case as they learn them, you know, on scene. Many times they're taking two statements. One driver saying this, the other driver saying that. That's all documented. But in a regular like crash in an intersection, we may be citing somebody for motor vehicle infraction, but we are not like determining fault of the crash. We're more investigating the facts and circumstances and then submitting that.
Yeah.
And then these are basically the action of the crash, and these also, like the other one, come from the crash reports themselves. Traveling straight ahead being the vast majority of them. Parked vehicles, slowing or stopped vehicles. Turning left is always right around there because that's, you know, you're turning left at an intersection. And many times they're not yielding to the traffic that's coming from the right, or many times even pedestrians and that type. That's when those types of crashes happen, when a pedestrian's crossing and the driver's taking a left but not looking back to the right, and somebody's like hitting a crosswalk or something like that.
or turning right and not looking for the pedestrian in the crosswalk. And your parked car, maybe you're hit and run, right? So you were parked in the parking lot, and it's not that the car was moving after it was parked, it was that somebody hit it.
Mhm.
And
Right.
so you're not determining fault, but that's just what one of the cars was doing. That's a lot of hit and runs.
Weather conditions. I always find this one interesting because this is, you know, the most crashes happen when it's clear. And that kind of plays into distracted driving and some of the other distracted or impaired or just aggressive driving. When it's clear, that's when we have the vast majority of crashes. And road surface, these also are extracted from the crash reports as well. They have to document the road surface, and interestingly, dry roadways are also the vast majority of the crashes.
And some of the ones we were looking at just after the time change, one of the factors may have been, you know, kind of a solar glare issue. Do you document that at all?
No, but that's actually, again, that's something that would be interesting to look at, because many times the crashes do with that solar glare, you know, east and west travel.
Right.
That will certainly play into motor vehicle crashes.
I think we were seeing that at Crafts and Eddy, but I may be totally wrong, just because once we put up the flex posts, those crashes seem to go away. All right, Councillor Bowman.
Right, so I have just a few questions. So first, I think thank you very much for all of this information. I'm loving seeing it. Good improvement so far. I do know, if I remember correctly, that the road safety bill that was just passed, that I believe that establishes the responsibility to increase reporting to the state for bike and peds, or a sort of a common framework. So do you have any idea what's going to happen with that as far as the increased reporting requirements or the standardized reporting requirements?
Yeah, well, I don't yet, but typically what they'll do is once that everything's done and goes through the legislature, they'll usually pass that stuff off to the Executive Office of Public Safety and Security and the Registry of Motor Vehicles. And then there'll be some period of transition where we'll have to update our RMS systems to account for whatever new data they want us to track. They'll build that into the uniform crash reports.
So I know that you, I was going to say, I know that you frequently get called upon as an expert to weigh in on some of this. So if we have many advocates, I'm sure who would be really interested in giving you their thoughts on the type of data that we like, Mr. Halley and Ms. Martin. If you have a chance to give input as to the type of data that would be helpful for us to, because ideally what we want to be able to use this data for is to identify the actions we can take as a city to reduce these types of crashes for the vulnerable road users. So I'm sure that they would be happy to give you some input that you could pass along, maybe if that's appropriate. The second question that I had was really maybe one for you and Mr. Sobel, which is I'm thinking about the types of changes that we have made in the past several years. One, which was made just this past year through Traffic Council, which was the eliminating the right on red at Center and Commonwealth, which was one of the intersections that was noted having a fair number of crashes. And I guess I would be interested in understanding, what's the look back period, 2 years or 4 years, 3 years or 5 years, to look back and see if these types of changes are making a difference in crashes. And I know that Walnut in Washington was one where the significant work has been done to improve the safety there. And I'm just interested in what sort of ongoing analysis there would be of some of these top crash locations after an intervention has been done to see if it's had an impact on reducing crashes. So I don't know if Mr. Sobel
I think that's
can,
a question for Mr. Sobel.
that's what I just said, yeah.
Sure. Good evening, councilors. Certainly a period of several years, I would say it is an important, time period when we're looking back at trends after an intervention or improvement has been constructed. To use, for example, the Councilor Bowman, the example you just brought up, I think it was Washington and Walnut, where it was listed in Chief Carmichael's list in the top 20 locations. Typically, what MassDOT does and what we do in the transportation division is not just look at the total crashes, but the crash rate per million vehicles entering an intersection.
Yeah.
Certainly, we would expect more crashes, just more traffic that's traveling through there. Washington Street is certainly a very busy road. Walnut Street is also an arterial road. So the fact that it's on the top 20 crash list within Newton after a couple of years after the reconstruction of it, I wouldn't immediately jump to any conclusion that means that the design wasn't as good as it could have been, or that it's not a safe intersection.
Right. I'm not concerned that we might very well find that it's still having crashes, but the severity of the crashes has changed, or that we have more pedestrian traffic there, which is great. So there are fewer maybe pedestrian crashes, but we have maybe more rear ending, and there could be other things going on. I guess I just was interested in looking at making sure that we are paying attention to the big changes we make and understanding what the crash data tells us about that. So that's it. Thank you very much.
That also sort of brings us to the other question of looking at the data, what does that tell us about what the city might want to pay attention to? A couple of observations just from a cursory look at this data, and we're not looking at we're not looking at very granular data. We're not looking at year over year, for instance, on the total number of the top 20 crash locations and whether that's changed from 2021 and 2020 to 2022, and we should. But just from what we're looking at here, I'm seeing a higher number of pedestrian and overall car crashes in the fall, September, October, November. I don't know if the rest of you noticed this. Just seems like that's when there's a higher cluster. And the other thing I noticed that's kind of concerning is that injury crashes, the two peaks are at 8 a.m. and 3 p.m., which corresponds unfortunately to when people are going and coming to and from school. So that also raises some red flags. As far as the crashes by age of operator, really interesting data, but what would make it even more interesting is to have a background, a background graph that shows average, population of Newtons. So you know how many 16-year-olds we have, and whether we have more of those than we have 29-year-olds, and sort of to see if there's anything that pops out as the population being incredibly safe drivers or incredibly dangerous drivers, given their incidence in the population. So the reason I also included Mr. Sobel here is to sort of get some policy answers on from, now that we've looked at some of this crash data as a committee, how does the transportation division, where do you take that and what does it tell you and how do you use this information?
Sure. Well, we certainly work closely with our colleagues in Newton Police. One thing that I will note, in addition to everything that Chief Carmichael presented, was that in recent years, MassDOT has also significantly improved their online crash portal and mapping system. I remember years ago, they used to just issue a spreadsheet of, here's all the crashes that happened in that community each year. And there was always a long lag time. So not only is the mapping and the system much better, the folks in the traffic bureau at Newton Police are also very diligent about submitting all the crash reports. So it's fairly up to date. Usually it's just a 1 to 2 month lag time. I was looking earlier today and there's already some crashes in the MassDOT portal from early January. So that's a very helpful tool that we use as well.
Excellent.
And we use the updated crash data holistically, the large scale number of crashes and patterns each year when we are updating our traffic calming priorities. When we're going through the evaluation for our traffic calming priorities, we're not necessarily digging into the individual crash reports, but we look at the total number of crashes at an intersection or along a roadway segment, as well as the crash rate that I talked about a little while ago. And then we also certainly look at whether it was an injury crash, and we'll weight those more heavily, or a crash with a pedestrian or a bicyclist, among several other factors that we look at in our traffic calming process, which I've presented to this group before. But just as a high level, is it near a village center, near a school, near a transit stop, public park, those types of things. So each year when we are updating our traffic calming evaluation, we do a review and take a look at all the recent crash data and update that for all the requests, not just the requests that we received that year, but the ones that we've looked at in previous years, the traffic calming requests that we've previously reviewed, and we'll update that and modify our priorities as needed, and basically what the data are telling us.
Excellent, thank you. I will also take questions, not just from my colleagues, but from the public. Couple from me, though. Chief, this might be for you. When we are changing speed limits or adding no turn on red because that's becoming a common cause of complaint, more often actually than actual crashes, is that we start to get complaints early. particularly through the safe routes process of drivers blowing through the no turn on red and into crosswalk where children might be. Are we doing directed patrols just for that transition period when people are getting used to the new traffic pattern?
Yes, we are. We've had other challenges though. We've, situations with like crossing guards and that kind of thing where we have officers that are covering various traffic posts. We've talked about this before, but officers are covering various traffic posts. And so we have a number of them that are doing that each day when school's going in and out, where we're taking them away from other assignments that they could be on at that time. But we do try our best to do that. Traffic Bureau, the Patrol Bureau, even our Community Services Bureau chips in and helps out with it. Some of the other focuses with, and specifically pedestrian, we do have the pedestrian grant that we have where we've kind of targeted enforcement on certain areas where we've gotten complaints on or where there's been crashes and that type of thing that have happened. So we concentrate on those areas. As far as like reducing speed limits and that, I will say my opinion, and Jason could chime in if he wants, but I think that was a good thing that Newton's done as far as reducing speed limits in some areas, because I believe that it doesn't stop speeding from happening, but it does, I think, reduce the that 85 percentile speed that thereby kind of bringing the speeds in a particular stretch or a particular area down a little bit. And I think that can be helpful. So.
Yeah, we were talking about that also as part of putting them in, is to influence Waze and Google, because now they have to add into their matrix that they're directing people down what is not a 30-mile-an-hour street, but a 20-mile-an-hour street. And they have to take that delay into account. It might just move them off of a local street and onto something that should be a little faster.
Yeah, that actually can be very helpful, because if you haven't noticed, if you're looking at if you have a GPS and you're following a GPS, is that Mass General Law has two different laws for speeds. One being posted speed limits, when you see that it's the speed limit is 40 miles an hour, and other areas that are not posted based on the basic speed laws. If you're looking at GPS, usually you will only see speed limits posted on the GPS in areas that are covered under the posted speed limit law. You won't see that on, if you're just in a thickly settled area or a non-divided highway, that type of thing. You won't see those speed limits pop up.
Good, thank you. The other thing I wanted to ask, do you have flashing speed feedback signs, Chief? Or Mr. Sobel? Do we have those in stock somewhere, and are they available?
Would you like me to answer this, Chief?
Yeah, we deploy them out.
Okay. And how much do they cost? How difficult is it to get them out if we need them?
Okay, can you also mention what types we have? Because there's the carts and then there's the poles, right? They're all solar driven, but there are different kinds.
Oh yeah, that would be helpful.
Yeah, we do. Jason can answer his side, but yeah, we do have a couple of different versions of it, the pole ones and the trailer, the ones that are out there. The trailer ones are a little bit older than some of the newer models you see on the poles. And we are able to put those up and extract data as far as speeds and determine 85 percentile speed limits and that kind of thing that are in a particular stretch. And I know, like Mr. Halley said earlier, in some of the crash reports, many times people are trying to see a certain speed that's taken place on a roadway. And we'll get those complaints that are saying, everybody's doing, 80 miles an hour down here. in this stretch of roadway, and that can be deceiving. Speed many times it's volume plays into it. But what we do is we put the sign up and we'll check the speeds in that stretch, and we'll be able to break it down as far as different percentiles of speed limits. And we usually focus on the 85 percentile speed limit, which essentially means there's a certain speed where 85% of the traffic that's traveling through that area is below that particular speed limit.
Great. So, those might be helpful also for some of our areas where we're switching the speed limit. Councilor Bowman.
So I think this might be a question for Mr. Sobel. So I have a vehicle that has a heads-up display that tells me what the speed limit is and what speed I'm going to try to get you to match it. And what's interesting is there are a few places in the city where the speed limit is not right on my heads-up display. And I was trying to figure out, like, is that something the city gives that input to the, do you have any idea how, like, what the data input is to that? I mean, it's for the most part right. It gets school zones right. It gets some of our slower speed zones. It was just a few places that I was like, I'm pretty sure it's not 30 here. Pretty sure it's because I can see no speed limit sign in place. So do you have any idea where that data comes from?
I do not know where they pull that data. I do know that we're talking about speed limit changes, and certainly in recent years we've implemented safety zone speed limits, 20-mile-per-hour zones, and some updates to the school zones. In regards to any changes to our regulatory speed limits, there have not been any changes. I believe 2006 is the most recent regulatory speed limit. Although there may be some changes in the future. That there is a docketed item for Traffic Council tomorrow.
I guess I'm just thinking as more and more vehicles have this kind of feature. I mean, I don't even have a very fancy car. If people are relying on that to tell them what the speed they're going is, it would be maybe good for us to understand where that data layer comes from so that we can make sure that our
TPR is updated to the web.
Exactly. Maybe they're pulling up the TPR, but yeah, that's, I don't know.
So
All right.
this is, I'm just to confirm, this is showing up in your car. It's showing you what
Yeah.
the speed limit.
Like I have a heads up and it tells me, oh, you're in the school zone, you're in a 20-mile-an-hour zone, it's 30. So it says like it's 30 on Center Street. And I'm like, there's not a single speed limit sign on Center Street. So I feel like it should be 25, but except where there's 20. So there are a few other places like that where I just wonder. So especially, there are many cars that are a lot fancier than mine that have semi-automatic driving that might be looking at speed limits and, so I guess I just wondered about that. So it's more and more technology.
Plus Waze and Google will tell you if you're exceeding the speed limit as well.
Right. So if Waze and Google is using the same layer, then I wanted to make sure that the safety changes we're making and with the speed limit changes we're making are actually getting fed back into these layers. So it's actually to the point where technology is driving decision-making and like that, we're getting all of that aligned so it works.
It'd be really helpful.
So I'm just curious, is it telling you if you're if you're driving through a neighborhood, say, and it's not posted, so in other words, you don't see speed limit signs along the roadway.
It usually tells me it's 25 miles an hour. And then just a few other places it'll pop up. It's 30 or 35. It goes into school limit. I mean, it never doesn't have a speed limit. It's always telling me what the speed limit is. So, so I'm always trying to drive below the speed limit. But the speed limit, I'm trying to drive 1 mile lower than that. I'm the police car in Newton.
Councilor Bowman is a one woman congestion machine. Ms. Martin, please.
Jen Martin, 86 Allen Ave, the chair of the Safe Routes to School Task Force. First of all, thank you, Chief Carmichael, for prioritizing making the data public, for getting the crash reports back up on the website. I read all the crash reports, and it's very helpful in working on pedestrian safety, pedestrian training in schools, bike safety, our messaging across the community. So we definitely, especially the pedestrian and bike crashes, look at that and see where we need to do some education in our community. So thank you for that. There certainly is a perception that there have been more serious crashes in the last year or two. We're seeing seemingly more vehicles that are in rollover crashes. I'm alarmed that there were 10 pedestrian motor vehicle crashes this past December, a serious crash with a pedestrian on Parker Street in early January. I'm wondering if you're seeing these trends and seemingly more serious rollover crashes, other crashes that you'd like us to take a look or a deeper dive into. And then I'm also wondering for Mr. Sobel, what can be done immediately to quickly address emerging concerns outside of the annual evaluation process. For example, we've seen some pretty serious recent crashes at Crafts in Albemarle, including a rollover crash yesterday. There's a fix coming in fiscal year 2025, MassDOT Safe Routes to School infrastructure grant, but that's a long way off. And we just had a preschool open there a couple weeks ago. That's a busy walking route for FA day students. It leads to the park. It's a walking route for Horace Mann students. I'm hearing from families that live in the area that they're now driving their kids today and to Horace Mann because they don't want them to cross the Crafts Albemarle intersection. So thank you both for your answers.
Who's starting first?
I'm happy to
Jason
start.
first.
Why don't you start, Jason?
So in regards to quick actions in the immediate aftermath of crashes, it varies depending on the specific situation. And, you know, in some cases, for example, the flex posts that were installed this past fall at Watertown and Eddy and Elliott, there were several crashes within a few days, and we felt that those flex posts would have a positive traffic calming effect and safety improvement. In as another example, the pedestrian crash earlier this month on Parker Street at Hagen, one of the contributing factors was roadway lighting, and we've initiated a process with Eversource to add an additional street light on an existing utility pole in the vicinity of that crosswalk. I'm going to refrain from comment on the Albemarle and Crafts intersections. Certainly I'm aware of the crash that occurred yesterday, but I don't have all the facts. I haven't had the opportunity to review the police report yet as it just occurred. But I will note that there are some crashes that occur due to inattentiveness or distracted driving, and there's not always an engineering solution for that. You know, as another example, in the past, I don't know, 6 months, there was a pedestrian crash on Pearl at school. And there was a lot of interest in doing an immediate response there. When we looked into the details of that crash, it was actually someone on a motorized scooter in the road who blew through a stop sign and didn't stop before pulling out or continuing into Pearl Street. And in that case, the scooter actually hit the side of a vehicle. So for crashes like that, there's not always an obvious, easy engineering solution that we can implement to improve safety.
Chief?
So certainly I agree with Jason and everything that he just said. You know, additionally, yes, we do pay attention when we see ticks up in pedestrian crashes or really any type of thing that we're tracking and trying to pay attention to. And we do try to, I know this is responsive, but when we have these things happen, we do try and deploy resources out there. Many times the way to be proactive is to respond to complaints where people are seeing certain driving behaviors taking place, and we can use that as a directed patrol or targeted enforcement type of thing. Especially right now with our grants, we do have the pedestrian grant that went into effect back in November. As far as you know, similar to what Jason said, the dynamics of the crash matter. I think that, you know, even with pedestrians and bicyclists, like I said earlier, because we have pedestrian bicyclist crashes doesn't mean necessarily that that's the driver of the car that caused the crash. Many times, you know, like I said, bicyclists might be riding contrary to the roadway rules, or they may, you know, again, like not stop for a stop sign or something, or a red light, and they're going into an intersection and they're either hitting a vehicle or that vehicle is hitting them. So there's human behavior. There's that element that's kind of, that plays into all of this that we don't have a lot of control over. As I mentioned, you know, distracted driving, aggressive type driving, you know, people rushing, impaired driving. There's all these other factors that are out there in our roadways that are contributing to all of this, that can be out of our control. Rollovers, and I know we also noticed that too. Several months ago, we saw that we were having additional rollovers. We actually looked at some of the vehicles that were involved and saw that primarily they were all RAV4 type vehicles, Toyota RAV4 vehicles. We couldn't find anything that was specific to the make that would lead us to believe there was more going on with that because of the make, but it's more the mechanics of the crash again, and just the location of it, you know, how the vehicle struck a curb and changed the center of mass of the vehicle that caused it to flip over. But we don't have any data to support, or, you know, what we attributed that to, other than we did notice that they were happening.
Interesting. Mr. Halley, Mike Halley.
Thank you, Counselor. I wanted to make one quick comment about sort of data, just to give an example of how useful it is, looking at Albemarle and Crafts. Again, I was able to look at the state database and look for the number of crashes that have happened there since 2012. And it's 77, and we know that is one of the reasons that the state gave the Safe Routes to School grant to fix that, because, you know, not its proximity to the schools, but just that's a remarkably large number of crashes for just kind of two roadways, you know, not the circle of death. But since 2019, we also had 26 crashes in the Newton Police crash reports up till the summer of 2022. But because we have that extra information, I could look to see how many were related to at least some of the crashes we had, and possibly even though the report's not done, what, you know, tentatively looks like happened is that vehicles are going southbound Albemarle and crossing Crafts. I could look and see that there were 12 crashes, not including these recent ones, that are that specific move, because the pictures in the report that the officers did showed that. And that in itself would put it in the top 20 crash locations, just that move. So that is really something that once I saw that, you know, I started letting people know, like, hey, you know, yes, we may fix this with MassDOT, but this is something we really need to look at. This is a behavior that, you know, especially in combination with close proximity to pedestrians, is something that needs to happen maybe quickly. Hopefully we get this level of analysis in the hands of every department so that we can do these what if questions and we can start looking at it. I mean, it's a hobby for me. Obviously, I have a concern for public safety, but this is something that we can really do. So let me just go to my quick questions. One, I know through our meetings, we found that the city wants, to avoid the damage to the flex posts. They do pull them up in the winter time when necessary so that the plows can get by. And I'm wondering if that is something that in areas where we really need it, or we might see a change in behavior, can we at least monitor that behavior? Or is there a way to do a little bit of a handoff that if there are directed patrols that we can sort of hit some of those locations that otherwise we would have been using engineering and we can't anymore? Can we do that? And just my last question to the chief is, I believe I saw some email that said that when we move from regulatory to statutory speed limits, that changes how you would do speed enforcement. Is that a correct? Was there some change in what you legally can do to if you were doing speed citations, or did I misunderstand that? Thank you.
Muted, Chief.
Sorry, I was muted. No, I was more talking about on your GPS. Many times the speed limit, the little speed limit signs will pop up to tell you the speed in a certain area. Those are typically, when you see that happen, that's usually in the areas that under Mass General Law are the posted speed limits. You won't typically see that under the non-posted speed limit areas, such as, a thickly settled area, or, like a non-divided highway, that type of stuff, where it would be 40 miles an hour or 30 miles an hour. But as far as enforcement, when if we're doing speeding enforcement in that area where it's posted or it's not posted, the citation would be written under two different Mass General laws.
All right.
Does that answer it?
Right. I had heard that there was something in Mass General laws that said whether you could do it as a stationary vehicle or if you had to track over a certain distance. Maybe I heard that incorrectly, but whether it was, I think that might have come from you, Counselor. Maybe I'm just incorrect. It's fine. I'll see whether I can find that piece of information. But I thought it did come from Newton PD. But I'll take a look.
Wasn't for me. Okay, I'm ready to take a motion to hold this and move to our final item, since we have some people here waiting for that to happen as well. Do I have a motion?
So move.
Okay. Motion to hold by Vice Chair Markowitz. All in favor, please say aye.
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 I'm an aye. Any nays? Any abstentions? All right, great. Thank you very much, Chief and Director. Very much looking forward to getting back with you again in the spring to talk traffic calming. Our next item is 525-22, request for an amendment to city ordinances regarding outdoor dining. From Her Honor the Mayor, requesting a discussion and amendment to city ordinances necessary to continue outdoor dining on a permanent basis. I believe that's you, Director Heath, and perhaps also Economic Director Sisson. So.
Good evening, Chair Downs. Maybe we can spice things up with a discussion of outdoor dining. I think as we said at the last meeting, we were going to come back with language that would enable us to put into place permanently what we've been doing for the last 2 years. So both John Sisson and Andrew Lee have been working at this. I'm happy to, along with our partners in the various departments, including DPW, who's here tonight, have been integral players in this. So I'm happy to kick things over to John to briefly discuss what the fix is to make this permanent, and then we're all available to answer any questions.
Okay. John, sufficient? Okay.
Yeah, so I think Barney covered pretty much all of it. I did in the memo I prepared with the help of several of my colleagues. We did sort of just spell out what we thought the timeline would be. We do want to get, and I think the committee has asked us to move forward quickly. So we would, hope to get both the ordinance itself, the part that shows up in section 12-70, as amended by our assistant city solicitor Andrew Lee, to expand the scope, and really it's, I think, to clarify what's covered by the ordinance. So we've been doing it already, as we've talked about. We're just getting it into the ordinance, so that it's authorized as the state emergency authorization will expire at the same time our dining season begins. So, and then as Barney touched on, there is, as Andrew identified, there is an element of zoning that also needs to be addressed, and that's spelled out on page 2 of the memo, and then as well as at the end of the memo, the additional, at the end of page 2, the additional, the clarifications to zoning. And those 3 sections that are listed there, and then following that is the language that Andrew has created. So I don't know, I don't want to get too far into the weeds in terms of process. We do have, a really well coordinated process across multiple departments that have oversight of the public way, of restaurants, and of leasing these spaces out. So I think the process is working. We just need to codify it to continue.
Good. Mr. Lee, do you want to give us a little overview of what you've proposed here?
So all I did was take exactly what I believe the committee had requested last time, which was codification of the current process, and tried to, in the most simple way possible, codify that into the existing ordinances. The way to do that was actually to take what we already have for sidewalk, cafe seating on sidewalks, because the process for the sidewalk seating that has been followed for the parking space seating has been more or less identical, obviously with some differences in terms of the review to ensure the proper safety protocols are there. But in terms of the departments that review it, the workflow is essentially the same. So taking that, what we've done is we've taken the exact process with identifying some of the kind of differences with regard to the parking spaces, such as barriers, ADA concerns, because there is a curb that drops off as opposed to the sidewalk that's flush with the entrance of a restaurant, and things of that nature are specifically called out. The rest of it is pretty much identical to how the sidewalk cafe seating works. And that's the extent of what's been done here.
Okay. Mr. Laney, can you make sure that we have everyone in from the waiting room? I just heard there's somebody in the waiting room. Any questions from the committee? Should we talk about the fee allocation and how you landed on those numbers?
I'll let Director Heath jump in here, but my memory is the city council has already
speak to that.
made a determination on the fees in the summer. Is that right, Barney?
No, so when we were facing this same juncture last year, around this time, we set the fee at $250 per parking space, and we actually waived it for the 2022 dining season. We're not proposing that we waive it this year, but that fee's already been set by the finance committee. So we don't plan on changing that.
So it's set last year and waived last year. Councilor Bowman.
Correct.
Yeah, I do have actually a few questions and just reviewing the detailed language. One is, so is it section 1270-1? So it says limit in-street dining. Does this mean that this limits the in-street dining to only spaces in front of the building? So if someone, and I don't know how many cases we have this today, but I feel like there are at least a few restaurants where maybe they go one space beyond because they have a very narrow front. I just want to make sure, I mean, I'm fine with it being contiguous. I have a problem with us being overly prescriptive if we limit it to only, if they happen to only have one parking space in front of their building because they've got a fire hydrant or something else. I do want to make sure that we make these spaces big enough to accommodate the needs of the restaurant.
So that's a
There
good
you-
question, Councilor Bowman, and it is contiguous. It's not literally, the frontage of the building, and that's the limit. For example, let's say there's half a parking space, because rarely do the parking spaces from end to end actually,
Right.
match that frontage. There's a practical aspect here where the whole space will be utilized, even though it's not literally fronting directly in front of you.
So yeah, I just want to make sure it's contiguous. I don't want it to be, I don't feel like we need to limit this in the language if we decided in a particular location that it was appropriate to allocate. So maybe a restaurant has 2 spaces in front and planning decides to allocate them 3, even though the 3rd space is contiguous to it, but maybe it's next door to another use. That I guess I just don't want this language to be overly limited in that way. I think the planning, the city council will always have an opportunity because they're going to be notified to push back if they think it's too big. But again, I don't want the language to suggest that it has to be somehow at least some portion of the space contiguous, yes, but not necessarily having that space be at least partially in front of the business. Does that make sense?
It does. The
I mean-
only other portion of that I will mention is that in situations where there is, and again, I'm explaining how it works right now.
Yeah.
Situations where the parking space, a portion that they want to use, or actually a whole other space that they like to utilize that is contiguous, however, is in front of another business, they do need to get written permission from the other business because, we want them to be good neighbors and make sure that we're trying to do everything we can to make sure all of the businesses are
Exactly.
happening.
Exactly. And I
That's correct.
understand that.
Yeah,
I
that's
just don't
been
want
the
them to be
practice.
limited. I just don't want it to be limited. So that language just felt to me like it said it had to be in front of the business. So if you want to take a further look at that, I don't know if anybody else has that feeling. Second, I will just say that there was a discussion of trash removal. And I don't think this is a real issue with any of the businesses that hopefully the on-street dining and cafe seat dining are removing any trash that's created every night, so not leaving it on the street overnight. That would seem to be a problem. Very supportive of the businesses. I know they're absolutely doing the right thing, but I just want that to be processed. And then lastly, I think my other question is about the appeals process. I'm very concerned that the timeline that's laid out here is very tight against the April 1st if someone does appeal. So can you please explain to us what if the zoning, so the zoning ZAP makes a recommendation, the city council adopts it, then it has 20 days to be appealed. A single person can appeal it, citywide, they can appeal. Why don't you give us maybe a little bit of an understanding of and then what would happen with the appeals process?
The appeal is basically someone has to file for a referendum. It's not something that's simply done. But more importantly, I think what the council should understand about that bit about the zoning piece is it's very limited. And all it really has to do with is in zoning right now for restaurant uses, the number of seats is utilized to calculate how many parking spaces a restaurant is required to have. And obviously, if you look at the language, it's very clear that that sidewalk cafe seating is exempt from that. But, you know, at that time, no one contemplated that there would be cafe seating in parking
Right.
spaces we have now. So I think that planning's, you know, terming it a clarification really is all it is. It's making clear that these seating that is pretty much the same as the sidewalk seating is going to be treated the same. The reason I say that is because even if that zoning amendment is being held up, it's not going to affect the licenses that these restaurants have. It's possibly, potentially, I don't know how many seats they have. They might be like not complying with zoning, but you know, practically speaking, it's not going to stop them from commencing their operations and outdoor dining during that outdoor dining season, if that makes sense.
Okay, that's, I guess, reassuring to hear. I guess I don't really, so the zoning process, if someone wanted to appeal that, they would be appealing it. They'd have to have a referendum, so they'd have to get 50 people to sign a document appealing it. So just help me understand that. I want to feel very comfortable that we're on a timeline to make sure that the restaurants can open up fully April 1st, and that they can feel confident about that after, you know, once zoning and planning and the city council make their decision.
You have a right, Councilor Bowman, that under the charter, they'd have to, it's basically 20 days before it becomes effective. And during that time is the time that citizens have the ability to get the signatures they need to challenge it.
Okay, all right, that's making me feel much better. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bowman. Does anyone, I tend to agree that with Councillor Bowman on the immediacy of the, you know, how close to the very front of the store you have to be, and whether that's communicated as, you know, if you want 2 spaces and you have a 1 space wide storefront, that might be seen as constraining. Mr. Sisson, do you have that concern at all, or you think this can be worked out?
You know, in our discussions, thank you, Counselor. I think in discussions with Andrew, and Andrew's had discussions with, I think it was Ralph Sacramone at the ABCC. The AB, if you have alcohol, I think to back up, you know, we don't need to put everything in this ordinance, because there are other ordinances out there, like the ABCC has been wrestling with this. You know, we don't need to reference the ADA. There's a good deal of regulation out there, I think, in the guide that we're putting together for the restaurants to roll out and implement, and for our inspectors to refer to. We can have a lot of reference there, but it's, you know, and Andrew can correct me if I'm wrong, but there's really not a necessity to you know, spell out everything within this ordinance. We are, as everyone has said, trying to move this forward quickly. So, you know, and, you know, second part of that, I would say, you know, as Andrew pointed out in our meeting earlier this week, we've only really gotten through 2 seasons. This is still a fledgling program. So that doesn't mean we can't come back, you know, this year or next year and look at, you know, how is this working, and maybe do a deeper dive. But for the sake of the, you know, April 1 start date, we just want to advance the ball as it is now, and then we can return if there are additional questions, and there should be. I think every municipality in Eastern Massachusetts is wrestling with this.
Okay, fair enough. I want to hear from members of the committee. Councilor Whitloff has his hand up, but for the rest of you to think about how you feel about this. I want to get a sense of how you feel about the language we're dealing with here. And I know that we have at least one member of the Chamber of Commerce and a restaurant owner in the Zoom room. And if you want to make a very brief statement, you're welcome to do so after I hear from the council. Councilor Whitloff.
Thank you, Counselor and a member of the Chamber of Commerce. I'm in total support of this. It's really wonderful when you have something that our citizens, our businesses, and the council is totally behind. I think the language is good. I think the pricing that we came up with is fair. And I will be proud to move this whenever you think the time is right.
Excellent. Anyone else on the committee?
Counselor Lipoff beat me to it. I totally agree with him. Full support of this and ready to vote yes when you're ready.
Okay, this is clearly going to be a tough discussion. Counselor Lucas? Counselor Maliki, how do you feel about this one?
Same.
Okay. Okay. In that case, Ms. Masterson or Ms. Guerin, do you want to have a word or two? You want to just let us get about the business of passing this thing?
I'd like a quick word. Thanks for having us on.
I
as
think that Kay would probably like to have a word.
Yeah, she's on.
Yeah. Thanks for having us on. And as you can imagine, our customers overwhelmingly love this. We certainly did our best to try and put expense and thoughtful design, you know, as most restaurant owners did. It's an important part of what we offer now and people expect it. And I agree. I think it's something that's new. We move forward with it. I'm interested in trying to figure out how we get better communication around the center on all kinds of things. So I think this would be one of them. So, you know, I think moving forward, it's important that the restaurants in the city communicate back and forth with a little more ease and a little less alarm about something going on. You know, we had the inspection issue last year. So I'm happy to work with the city on making this better and better. But I really applaud your support of it because it's really important to the restaurant industry and to our local businesses.
Excellent. Well, I think we have a motion on the floor from Councilor Lipoff. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. All right. Any nays? Any abstentions? I think we've got that one passed, and I'm relieved there's a zoning.
So
item.
under Counselor,
Sorry, go ahead. Someone has it.
Shawnee, you're muted.
Yeah.
oh, when you took the motion, I felt it wasn't necessary for me to speak, but thank you for addressing this evening. And I just want to speak on behalf of the Charles River Regional Chamber that we did send out a survey, and overwhelmingly, you know, the citizens did say that they had loved the outdoor dining. And I think it was a good indicator to see that people going forward post-COVID really
I think we got the gist of it, but your internet's breaking up. You might want to.
Want this to leave their community. So I just wanted to come tonight to speak on that. I appreciate all your hard work. Sorry, bad reception, but I think you got the gist of it.
Got the gist of it. Yeah.
And we're really thrilled that we have John with us now, the new economic development piece. It's been really good partnership. So thank you.
Great, thank you.
Anyway, you can let Councilor Grossman vote on that last one if she wants to.
Yeah, Councilor Grossman, welcome.
We
Do
can,
you want to make it an 8-0 vote for outdoor dining?
Oh, definitely.
Okay. Ms. Delaney, that's now an 8-0 vote for that.
I
Um,
apologize for joining late. Tonight was the Bigelow Middle School Chorus Concert. So
I expect it was fabulous.
it was fabulous. It's the first indoor live concert I think they've had since COVID. So it was very joyful.
Oh, hooray. That's wonderful. All right, I think that concludes our business for tonight.
Counselor Down, do you have to take a motion on NAN on the next item, please?
Oh, exactly. You are, thank you so much. We have one more item, 137-22. Granting administrative authority to seasonably approve the use of on-street parking for outdoor dining. Now that we have the earlier one, 525-22 passed, we can take this as a no action necessary if I can get a motion.
A motion to NAN.
Motion from Councillor Bowman. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Anyone want to hang around and discuss this one any further? If
No,
not, I'll
we're
take a
good.
motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
All right, great seeing everyone. This is it.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.